Diaguib Golair Accordia August Foil Chirot. Welcome to Be My Guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lear Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary, Clare's Wish Foundation in Limerick, and Deel Animal Rescue in Limerick. And my spectacular guest today is a woman I got to know on LinkedIn, and I've been stalking her LinkedIn page and wondering, I really have to have this lady on. And she's Annette Comer. And Annette is a best-selling author, founder of the world's greatest women academy, and recipient of the coveted Woman of the Year award from the National Association of Professional Women. Her no-nonsense approach is rich with knowledge from science-based research studies, as well as her own playbook across a variety of businesses as a corporate and entrepreneurial woman leader. But what's most important is who women become after they've experienced Annette's life-changing process. Driven women not only develop the skills to become top leaders who can embody their authenticity, but also leaders that can confidently walk side by side with men to bring about positive change in the world. And I'm hoping Annette is going to help me to become one of those women who can walk side by side with her fellow man.
I understand.
And all that was from your LinkedIn page, in case you're wondering where I got that. That's from your LinkedIn page. But welcome, Annette.
Thank you, Mary. I'm just honored to be here. I'm glad that we have connected.
Indeed, so am I. Tell me, Annette, how did you go down the road of business to start? Were you always business orientated?
I would say so. I mean, even when I was a child, I was, when they'd have these, I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world, but in America, they have they have these candy bars you can sell to raise money for a school project or whatever, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And I was always one of the top salespeople. I could figure out how to get them and count the revenue and figure out what my cost was going to be. So I always had an inclination of thinking that way.
Yeah.
And I always, and then as I went on into college, I didn't pursue business in college. I actually pursued and secured an engineering degree. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. But as the decades flew by, when I got into my 40s, that time I had left corporate and had started an international consulting business and was working with executives around the world. In the Middle East and Europe, South America, and the US. And it was that point I thought to myself, I really would be nice to get all the theory behind all this international business that I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I went back then and actually studied around the world, learning how to do business around the world from a very theoretical standpoint.
Well, you say you started off as in engineering, which in itself, I suppose, for a long time, my uncle, my aunt's husband, was working in Sellafield nuclear plant as an engineer for many, many years. So I have some knowledge of engineering, and I know that you've got to be really good at maths, which I wasn't. So that straight over my head. But did you find that, one, you were already involved in an area that was, I suppose, primarily considered to be male-orientated occupation, engineering, and then how were you taken as a female engineer in the Middle East? Were things difficult for you? I mean, being an engineer and being a female engineer in the Middle East, that must have thrown up its own challenges as well.
Well, certainly, and you were exactly right. The engineering and mechanical engineering was especially very male dominated.
Yeah.
Even through the coursework in the college courses. Then when I went into the corporate arena, it was no better. I was usually the only female that would be in meetings. I would often get pushed back in terms of why was I there? engineers aren't supposed to smell good. They aren't supposed to look good. You know, all those silly nonsense things that as a young woman, you just kind of chuckle about, but then you start to realize they do impact how powerful you can be in the business arena.
Yeah.
And it wasn't in terms of I didn't start doing work in the Middle East until I was in my 50s. But even then, it was interesting watching the reaction because it's an extremely male-dominated society, but so much of the world is. And by that time, I had already started to understand what the skills that I needed to finesse and how the rules of the game were being played. And I think that is something earlier in my career, Mary, had really blindsided me, is that I didn't understand that business was a game. And most women don't understand that. And for men, it is very much a game. It has winners, it has losers, it has rules, it has strategy, it has all these things. And for women, they have never viewed it that way. They view it about relationships, and they want everybody to win and this type of thing. And they want it to be impactful.
Do you think it's because you have an analytical mind anyway? You have a mathematical mind of compartmentalizing problems, if you like, and saying, well, this is, and I have to solve this problem. Whereas generally a lot of women like me tend to lead with their heart rather than their head in situations, and you get emotional if somebody criticizes you or whatever. Whereas if you're mathematically minded or pragmatic about things, that you seem to have a better way of adapting in business, in a male-orientated business, because you're able to break down the softness, if you like, without losing any of your femininity, which, I mean, it's pretty obvious how feminine you are within a male-dominated, if you like, society, but yet you can still thrive and keep that feminine side of you. You worry that some people, when they go into, they try so hard to be equal or tougher than men, that they lose that sensitivity as well. They lose that female side of themselves, and I worry. Do you agree with me?
Yes, I do agree with you, and it's for myself, it's interesting how you have to be very aware of it. And so you have to figure out a way that you're going to balance that female versus male energy. Certainly being in the engineering field and having that analytical way to approach things, certainly I am very comfortable in my male energy space.
Yeah.
And to balance that, you know, while I was in corporate, I had an entrepreneur side going on, and the businesses that I started on the side, which were actual retail storefronts, were all businesses that catered to women. So it was an interesting journey, because it was a critical teaching point for me as I grew, in that learning that how I handled male employees, which at that time in the corporate, I had 40 some male employees reporting to me, all men. And then in my entrepreneur ventures, I had all females reporting to me. And I learned very quickly, if I wanted to keep a staff in my entrepreneur, I could not handle them the same way I handled men. So that was the first eye opener for me, that there is a difference in how women operate in business versus men.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think, do you find that women, as I said, kind of like earlier, that women, when they go into business, think that they've got to be tougher, and are therefore tougher on their employees, those subordinate to them? That, I mean, I've always worked with men, apart from in the entertainment industry, where it was mostly all women. But in other jobs, I've worked with a lot of men, and I loved working with them. I found them great bosses, and I never had a problem. But then I suppose I wasn't competing with them for a position. I was always a subordinate. Do you think that women are harder to work for than men, or is that a generalization? Do they try so hard to be equal?
I don't know if they're necessarily harder to work for. I think for a woman leader stepping into a management role, it is confusing for her because there are so few role models. And so if she looks to the role models of the men that she's worked for in the past and tries to replicate that, it never quite feels authentic to her. So it becomes a place of total confusion because she wants the same thing men want in terms of success and all the things that come with it. But the society messages are not supporting that she behave that way. And so it becomes a very confusing puzzle that she has to figure out. And that certainly I have now, the things that I offer is to help women to figure out that puzzle, because it is a puzzle.
Yeah.
And if you can say, well, this is why men do it. If I do that, well, what will happen is often they'll get society pushback and says, well, no, that's not the way you behave as a woman. And then you say, well, how do I behave? What do I do? And so often women will overcompensate. They'll go too far into the male energy space.
I think we've been brought up in an era, some of us have been brought up in an era where women were, I know I'd often hear my dad saying, ladies should be seen and not heard. And my dad was English and he was very quiet, and I was an only child, and he'd always say, Mary, ladies should be seen and not heard. And you never outgrow that. And you always kind of think that if you're seen as too powerful or you're too assertive, you're trying to assert your rights as a woman, that you're seen as being almost too aggressive. Whereas men aren't seen that way. They're seen as driven, whereas women are seen as aggressive if they're.
Now, I will tell you that what I have found is that in the world of business that is very male dominated, that once a woman is able to show up confident and competent, that those biases that men possess often fade away fairly quickly. If a woman shows up and a man classifies her as one of those women, meaning a typical female behavior, what they deem as a typical female behavior, they will write her off very quickly and not take her seriously. But if she shows up as confident and competent at what she does, that is really what they want in the end. And you can start to walk side by side with them in a very strong way. And they welcome that. It's been my experience.
I've never really experienced a bad attitude from men in business. I hear people saying it all the time. Oh, it's hard to work for men. I prefer working for women. I actually never minded working for men. I always found once you do your work that I suppose back to what you say, if you appear confident and competent about what you do, even if it's in a subordinate role. But I just think, do you think that women can have it all? Is it possible for us as women to have it all, to have the family, to have the lifestyle, to have the children, to have the careers, or are we actually running ourselves thin by wanting everything?
I think we can have it all, but I'm not sure we can have it all at the same time at that moment. I think it is the way I deal with some of the women executives is I try to tell them to think of their life as a house, and that each room in the house is where they need to go and be. And when they're in that room, they need to realize they are in that room. For example, if you're a businesswoman who is also a mother, so when you're at work, go into the room of where you're dealing with your employees and the business issues. And when you leave that room, close the door and go into the room now that is your home space. And then truly be in that room, dealing with whatever issues or needs attention in that room. And then when you leave that room and you go into the space of self-care, be in that room. Don't be trying to open the door and peek into what's happening in the business world and what's happening in the family world, because that is when you end up going to a burnout place.
You can't be all things to all men and all
at the same time. Right. And that's what the mistake women make, I think, is we try to be all things to everybody at one moment. And
we want it all, and we want it now. And I mean, I say that as a child who's always been, I want it yesterday. But I think I've learned, I mean, as I got older, I got more academic or interested in academia. All I was ever interested in was the arts. But I think that's fine. I think as people, we need to be fine with what we have at that stage in our lives, because we go through so many stages. And it's like that building, that house that you're talking about. I was inside in that room for so long. And now I'm in a different room of my life. But I'm trying to get to the next room on the next level, and just don't know how to do that. but the fact that you want to get to the next room, if you believe that you can get there, Mary, then if you just look, it's interesting. If you watch and you look and you're open, it's like almost like the universe will start to deliver the right people to you. But what happens to us, we get so busy. Particularly women do this. They get so busy trying to do so many things. They pride themselves that they're multitaskers and they can do so many things. And when you're busy, you miss things. You can't see. If you don't stop long enough to see what opportunities are coming your way, you miss them. How difficult has COVID been now for you? Because your business is primarily, I suppose, built around business. And built around people achieving in business. And business has been more or less halted in lots of countries, not least here in Ireland. We have the longest lockdown of any country in the world. It's insane right now. I mean, it's just insane. We're just starting to kind of come out of it. But how difficult is it for you, number one, actually trying to run your business in COVID? But secondly, trying to motivate people to believe that they are going to have businesses to actually develop, or that they're going to be able to get back into business. Because I see a lot of my friends who are singers and musicians, and their businesses have been just decimated with this, the music industry. And I can imagine that somebody like you trying to motivate women and that, to believe that they are going to be successful in business, and against their wishes and against everything, that they can't do anything about the fact that their businesses have been destroyed.
Well, and the thing that that I would say to those women that you have mentioned is to take an inventory of what they can and what they cannot control. Right, because during this whole COVID experience, there's been things that we do have control over, and there's things we have absolutely no control over. And to fret about the things you can't control have in any way, just all it does is make you sick and old and tired. So for sure, and certainly a lot of us, and fat. We've all got fat probably during COVID in some ways.
Stuff I know. Double my weight.
You know, more comfort food's been eaten in my house in the last year than it's been in the last 10 years.
But the camera just comes from the ear off.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then the second thing is, once they do that and look at the things they do have control on, then think about putting together what can they do with those. So, for example, you know, for business women and singers and artists, you know, industries that have been decimated by the COVID experience is, they do have somewhat control over their finances. They have some control over how now whether they've done a good job of having an emergency fund and some of those kind of things. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't, and that may make a decision for them of how much they're going to have to hustle and how much stress they have during that. But you know, for me personally, you know, I have 4 different companies. And the one that had...
But I'm about to ask you how you managed to run one, let alone four.
I know. I don't know. I can't do it, Mary. That's part of the problem, probably. And sometimes I get in the middle of it and think, what the heck are you doing? But I keep doing. So two of those companies are companies that were created to generate passive income. And they were very much in the real estate markets. So during COVID, they weren't impacted they were impacted, but not as negatively as some of the others. And the third company was one that catered 100% to women. It's an actual storefront that has employees and services and assets and so on and so forth of different nature.
That's the world's greatest women academy.
No, that's not that one. We'll talk about that one in a second. That's in the fourth company. So the third company, that retail storefront actually had its doors shuttered for 2 months because of the COVID, what was happening here in the US. And then when I watched what happened during those 2 months, so I offered something. I thought, okay, I can't do anything about the government requirements that I shut my doors, but I still have products on my shelf. And I do have the control of being able to get products in customers' hands through mailing to them, having them come by and have curbside service where I can take things out to them, that kind of thing. The service side of the business, I can't do anything about. Okay.
Yeah.
So I cut my expenses. I laid employees off temporarily, let them go on government programs to help them. And then I had one employee working, instead of 40 hours a week, I had her working 4 hours a week, taking the mail orders and those kind of things. And that was enough hours to get what I needed, but she could still get access to the government programs. And the interesting thing from that was I found that 80% of my retail sales held up during the doors being completely closed as compared to when I was open full time. So when I looked at that, I said, oh my gosh,
do I really need the building around?
Right. Do I need to be open all these hours and these crazy hours? So when we came out of that restricted lockdown and I opened my doors again, I reduced my hours by half and my sales did not change. So there was an example of something that I was challenged with an assumption I had. But because I was willing to think, okay, what can I control? Okay, I have control of my inventory. Now, what do I do with it to make it?
But that's back to your analytical mind again.
Exactly, very possibly, yes. And then in the other company, which is where the world's greatest women academy is and all of that, obviously I couldn't do any live events. And I did not want to take it to a virtual academy. So I thought, okay, how am I going to bring value to the world and impact the world during this time? And then I came up with the idea that I was going to interview some powerful women around the world, some very successful women leaders around the world in something called the World's Greatest Women podcast. And I could do that in a platform and in a story format that I could share nuggets of wisdom from all these women in a form that no matter where you were sitting in lockdown, no matter how much money you had, it was a vehicle that you could access to keep growing and learning and be inspired as well. So I created a library of wisdom, and that's what I did with my time during COVID, is creating those platforms and those vehicles. And
I've been kind of the same, I suppose, through lockdown. I mean, in the sense that we were trying, as I said to you off camera, trying to start the radio station or the media company. And then lockdown happened and we couldn't get in equipment or anything like that. So I just saw Zoom and I thought, well, this is a good way. So I've been involved, I suppose, in Irish dancing worldwide since I was 4. And so I started interviewing people from all walks of life, but a lot of Irish dancing teachers who got to see their colleagues in a completely different light. They were no longer just the world champion teachers or the world champion dancers. They were seeing them as human beings, which was great, because once lockdown ends, we hopefully will have a completely different appreciation. But more than that, I was able to, I suppose, talk to survivors and children of survivors of the Holocaust, which was my research area, and do that. So I found that, you know, when you think laterally, you're able to find ways of keeping yourself occupied, number one, but bringing your business, as you did, to the internet rather than the conventional way that you were doing your business. Whereas, did you find that COVID gave you the, how will I put it this way? Did you find that there were advantages forced upon you through COVID?
Certainly, and probably was what I referenced earlier. It cleared out the noise.
Yeah.
It created a lot of quiet time that certainly for people that are very driven like myself, it can be very uncomfortable. And I tried to look at it and actually exercised it as an opportunity to get even more curious about things and to use that time to explore my curiosities about how to reach women through podcasting mechanisms, or how to create YouTube channels, or how to do whatever, you know, and how to, the list is long. We all have something we're curious about. And so that did create that space. Now, you know, for those that, you know, for me, even on the revenue coming in, the money coming in on that company, I had some international clients that are on retainers with me. So we've worked out a way that I could still provide them value, even though I wasn't going to be seeing them in person in some place in the world. So, you know, if from a business standpoint, what I would say to you and to your listeners is to think about where are places that you can have money coming in many different scenarios. Because business is almost like in engineering, we call it a sinusoidal wave. I don't know if you know what that is, but there'll be up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's true of whatever business that you're in for the most part. And so you say, how do I, when it's down, do I have some other business idea that can be up at that time?
But little did you know when, I suppose, starting out in your business, and did any of us know that we were going to be challenged to learn all these new things that we had to do through COVID, and that we'd get the opportunity, which I think it's a remarkable opportunity, to get to speak to the Annette Comers of the world, halfway across, or well, maybe not halfway across the world, but I've spoken
across the pond for sure.
Across the pond. I've spoken to people in Australia and New Zealand and everything, and the one thing that you actually find, or that I find through the podcast is, or that I try to bring out, is how much alike we are and how much we're all suffering the same through this, and we're all trying to grapple at keeping ourselves sane and keeping our businesses alive and keeping ourselves motivated. And little did we think at the start of this that, say, you'd be speaking to me or I'd be speaking to you. And I suppose in that respect, it's been good, you know. Absolutely. But it's been very bad for people who don't have the motivation to try to get online. You know, people who say, oh, I never go online. I've never used Facebook, or I've never used Twitter or LinkedIn. I just think there's so much advantages to the internet and to certainly to Zoom. Do you? Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, I think it is. And I think we have, it's going to challenge our way of thinking of things that we thought were not possible before. I think maybe we will find that we were wrong. There's all kinds of things that we can rethink how we do our work, how we connect with people. Do I ever think it'll replace 100% face-to-face contact? No, I hope not.
I hope not too.
That would be a horrible experience for me personally. Even though I'm very much an introvert, I need the contact with people. I need the energy.
And the hardest thing, not being able to hug.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I'm a hugger too. So yeah, I get that.
I just find that so hard. When I see friends, I'm itching to just hug them. I have one friend who, and we refused to, we always hugged, you know, when we meet, but it's just like, she's had her injections. She's fine.
She's fine, right, for sure.
But you wrote a best-selling book, Rescue Me, How to Save Yourself and Your Sanity. when things go wrong. And it's in 5 categories: decision making and problem solving, management and leadership, entrepreneurship, nonfiction education, and business management. How did you manage to get your book onto the bestseller list? I've written a book and I'm afraid to even promote it. I'm terrible, you know. I'm useless. I have about 20 of them at home in a box, and I only said it to a friend of mine today. I really need to start selling these and promoting them. But they're academic books, so they're not really they're not self-help books or anything. They're not something you'd read in bed to help you to sleep, you know, or anything, or to soothe your mind.
Right. But there is an audience for them.
There's an audience.
Absolutely. So then the question would be, you know, why aren't you out? Why aren't you letting that audience know that you have the book?
I'm a bit embarrassed about it.
Well, I was going to say that when I rolled out my book, Mary, I thought I was going to throw up. I was literally almost sick for a week.
I fainted the day mine was published and ended up in hospital for 6 weeks.
Yeah, there you go. And I look back at that and I think, how silly. But if you really boiled it down, I was so worried about, I had poured myself into a book. What if it wasn't good enough? What if people judged it? All these crazy things that go through your head. And I realized that when it went out, it was received by the right audience better than I thought it would be. Those that didn't like it, it didn't kill me. And it wasn't me. The book wasn't me. It was just a portion of what I shared. And when I depersonalized it, now I will tell you that once it was published, I've never read the book since then.
Oh, I haven't either.
Yeah. I have thought several times I need to go back and read my own book because people
over there, and I've never read it. I've never read it since the day it was published. But as I say, I got such a shock when I saw it published, or when I heard it was published, that I got a migraine. I took painkillers, and they didn't agree with me, and I came backwards off a chair and ended up in hospital. So I was in hospital when the book was actually posted to me.
Right.
And since then I've been no good at selling it.
Well, and you ought to. And what you might do, Mary, is you might think of a small select audience that you know it would resonate with, and get it in their hands, and build your confidence level that it really is a good book and it really does have value. And if you can do that and take it away that it's not about you, it's about what you have to share, that you wrote it for others. You didn't write it for you necessarily.
No.
You wrote it to share for others. And so when you hide it and don't share it, then you're really doing an injustice to the audience that's waiting for it.
Well, it's my unabridged PhD, and I did all the artwork for it, as well as all the portraits of child victims. But I just kind of think, oh God, no one is going to go. You know, we tend to be. I think we tend to be, once you get into the creative realm, you tend to be kind of self-deprecating, in the sense that you think, oh, no, I've done this. This has been my baby for so long. Now I've got to hand it over to somebody who's going to criticize it.
Right. That's what I'll say. We get ourselves all attached to a project. And if we can separate that in some fashion, and women do that so much more than men do. Men do not attach themselves to their work in that type of way that women do.
No, I don't think they do.
I know they don't. It is to them. It's again, because they look at things as a game in so many ways. So it's not about them. It's about it's about the game
process.
And for women, it becomes very personal. They put now, with that said, women are a very important part of the leadership that the world needs, because they do have the ability to see that personal side and to think about the impact decisions make on an organization, and you know, so many levels of interpersonal type leadership skills that men are not as strong on. And then when we are able to combine the two leadership skills, we have a winning combination for sure.
And tell me, what is the world's greatest women academy? What exactly does it entail?
Well, let me tell you how it came about, and that will help you know what it entails. When I was doing all this international work, and I had gone and gotten these advanced degrees on the international business front, when I came back into working with executives around the world, I had a different lens. And what I noticed is that the men executives seemed to do so much better in the business world and smooth sailing more so than the women executives. The women executives would often shoot themselves in the foot, they'd get off track. Mm-hmm. And I got curious, again, remember that engineering side, that analytical side. I got curious as to about what did men do different than women? Because women were smart, they were well educated, they worked hard, they had, all these the traits that we would normally identify as being those of success.
Yeah.
And what I found is there were 5 skills that men possessed that women didn't do so well at.
Okay.
So I put together the world's greatest women academy to teach those 5 skills to women. And then once I taught them in the academy setting, I followed each of the attendees for a year to see if they made a difference.
Wow.
And what I found is the entrepreneur women, a large percentage of those doubled and tripled their bottom lines. And that for the corporate women, that many of them averaged 40% pay increase in the first year. So what that told me was that if women have these skills and know the rules of the game they're playing, get out of their way, they can be wildly successful and can accomplish as much or more than men. And that's how the academy was born.
It's a great name, the world's greatest women academy. How did that come about?
That name came about sitting in a hotel waiting to catch a flight in the island of Hawaii. I was trying to come up with a name for the program, and I can't tell you, I guess divine download. And it just popped up into my mind that's what it needs to be. And so I stayed with it.
Yeah, it has to be what you want it to be.
Right. It has to be the vision of what I want for the women. And I want women to be able to step into seeing themselves and being some of the world's greatest.
Yeah.
And so the title itself sets the goal pretty high, doesn't it?
Pardon?
The title itself sets the goal pretty high.
Yeah, and I suppose it's to understand that you don't have to be better than anyone. You just have to be better than the previous you.
Correct.
Because we've all got so many others within ourselves. The other that has been untapped. The other that's waiting to be released. I'm waiting for the other to be released. That's really assertive and very businesslike, and that's even an eighth of what you are, Annette, or what you come across as being, quietly assertive and quietly businesslike. I never know where to start. I have all the ideas in my head. I'm a great ideas person, but I'm great for doing things. But they never seem to achieve anything, and never seem to get where I'm trying to get to. Does that make sense?
Sure. And the academy would help you with that, because it helps you understand the skills that you need to sharpen to be able to make those ideas come together in a business format where you can play in a game that's so unfamiliar for you, and maybe where you lack confidence in. But once you understand those things, you've got the smarts, you've got the education, and you've got the desire. You just got a missing piece. It's like a puzzle.
Yeah. So, the thing about it is, your book, Rescue Me, what was it really, what was it, do you think, that actually resonated with people?
Well, let me tell you how the book came about. So the book came about, I bought a business with my youngest brother. Don't do that, by the way. Don't buy a business with family. it's hard to fire a brother if things aren't going well.
Yeah, they say you should stay well away from family when you're actually setting up a business.
Yes, we think it's the right way to go because we can trust them and all that, but they're very complicated relationships that can get intertwined in a not a healthy way. But anyway, when I bought that business, it was a very large business, and the intentions were my brother was going to run the business, and I was going to be the financing behind it. Okay, and he was coming from a corporate setting. Thought what I did looked so easy that he wanted to have a piece of it. And then when we got into the business, shortly after we bought the business, the 9/11 happened in the U.S. And as we all know, the whole country of the United States came to a screeching halt. Business got turned on its ears. And what we lost 80% of the money we had coming in from customers within a month's period of time. And yet the business was heavily leveraged. There was a lot of money borrowed against the business. So for the next 7 years, we fought through that. The business should have failed, but both of us refused to let it fail. So the book is about that journey of taking, how do you turn a company around while still maintaining valuable relationships? Mm-hmm. And then at the end, how do you come out on top? And that's what the book is about. And at the time that it was released, it was at a time when people were trying to figure out, how do you come out on top, and how do you the world has changed and so on and so forth. How do we maneuver this? What are the things I need to do with employees and hiring and money flow and all these things? And it's interesting because now the book has had a resurgence of interest, because we're in the same type of situation again, where people are saying, how do I save myself from the insanity that's around me? And how do I save relationships? And how do I make money again? And how do I get myself out of debt? And all those types of things.
Do you think that COVID has, created almost a monster in some respects, in the sense that people are saying to themselves, why do I need a business? Why do I need a premises? I can do all of this from home. And then you have people who depend on working for others because they wouldn't have the entrepreneurial know-how, or even the get up and go to go out and set up their own business from home, or wouldn't want to be working from home. They want to go out and work. They want to get out of the house and go to an office every day. But yet often business owners are saying, well, I can run it from home and I can have people in for less hours in the day or less hours in the week. And do you think that that's a double-edged sword, that in one respect it's great for certain businesses, but the businesses that actually need to actually communicate physically with other people, that it's not so good for? Does that make sense?
Well, and I think that's true. And I think in the entrepreneur space, it can be very lonely.
Yeah.
And I think that will be the case for many people that think being at home all the time is really the answer. It's been the answer now because for lots of reasons. It's been scary to go out. We've been forced to, you have time with the children, whatever. But as a long-term plan, do I think it'll change the way we view work? Absolutely. It's gone on long enough now that people will develop new habits. Will those habits serve them well in companies? I think we're still watching that story unfold.
Yeah, I think so too, because I think people have started off as a novelty, working from home, coming down in your pajamas and going on Zoom and talking to people, and but then it became, as you say, a habit. And for some, it'll be a habit that's very hard to break, to get back into working in a physical environment with other people. But there's a lot of people out there now who are just they're at the end of their tether I'm an only child. I'm used to my own company. I've never been afraid I've always been able to find something to do to occupy myself. But even at this stage, I've had it now with
of course.
Isolation. There's only so much a human being can take. We're social animals. And And I just wonder how much business, how many buildings are going to be closed down because people have decided, oh, why should I be paying rent when I can work from home?
Right, right, of course. Of course,
You
it will
know?
change the world forever in so many ways. Hopefully it'll make us better. That's what I'm hoping for.
So what's your next step now? Are you going to write any more books?
Yes, I have two things that are brewing on the horizon. I will be restarting the Academy as the world starts to open up. And that will be, it'll have additional depth and content even from priors because I've had all this time to do additional research and such. And I will continue with my World's Greatest Women podcast. If you haven't listened in, you should, because it's amazing in terms of these women. I have to say, I've been
going to listen in.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll just be blown away by them. And from that, I started that effort in the 1st of December interviewing women. Since then, I've interviewed 133 women. And
is it a public podcast?
Yes, you can find it on any of the podcast platforms, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, any of those. It's on 13 different podcast platforms. So it's in Pandora, it's on iHeartRadio.
Visual?
No, it's all audio. Yeah, so you can plug it into, your earbobs and listen while you're washing the dishes or whatever you're doing, or when you're getting ready for bed, or whatever, you're having breakfast. And from that research of and the pleasure of interviewing all those women, there will be a book out of that. What I have discovered from that, of what it takes to make women reach these pinnacles of success, it'd be a shame for me to keep that in my database and not share that.
Yeah, I know exactly how you're thinking, because I've been feeling the same way about, all the interviews that I've done over the year, the 2 years now, and interviews that I've done before. There's at least, I suppose, two books from, that you could go in any direction, whether it's, as I say, in my area, 3 books at least. I mean, if you went with the general, or if you went with the survivor testimony, or you went with, there's so many people's stories. I love listening to people's stories about how they've taken the journeys they've taken. And what I think what we all have in common is this desire to be happy and to do something. There's that adage that if you if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I think we all strive very, very hard to find that thing that we love that also allows us to earn a living, to survive. Because I think no matter how much money you earn, if you're unhappy doing the thing that gives you that money, then I don't know, is it worth, it's not a very good trade-off. You're better off earning less, I think, and doing something that makes you want to get up every morning. Mm. And I love these interviews. I love coming in and chatting to people and hearing their stories and finding out just how much we all have in common.
Right, I agree. Yeah, and I applaud you for your work that you're doing. And yes, you do need to take that light out from under the bushel basket and let the rest of the world see it.
I better get that book out. But my roof came in my house, and my roof actually narrowly missed the box of books. And I thought, Jesus, their books are still there, and they're untouched and unscathed, and
just waiting
for somebody to say, yeah. And you're almost apologetic, and someone says, oh, you wrote a book? Yeah, I did. And you're kind of there thinking nobody wants to learn because it's that thick,
right?
And it's an academic book, and it's not easy reading, and you kind of, yes, if you're into psychology or philosophy or deportation, or you're into trauma, or there's so many people that it would be of interest to, but it's easy for me to say that to you, but not so easy for me to go out and sell it and say, look, here's my book. It's just so interesting for all of you.
Yeah. Yes, I understand.
Annette, thank you so very much for coming on and talking to me today.
And Mary, thank you. Thank you for finding me on LinkedIn and reaching out and letting me be a part of your journey.
Oh, and same here. But your journey is much more successful than mine.
Oh, well, it's all a matter of how we measure success. So
the way they say, if you could rub off somebody who's successful, you might. We can't even do that.
Not currently, but we will be able to. And I expect to see you in one of my academies.
Absolutely.
In the year ahead, for sure.
You keep much.
And thank you, Mary.
Shindera Leshan Clore, that's the end of the show for today. Until the next time, Lacunav Day. Bawalam Tugaler Chekana Sonasagas Grow. I wish you peace, happiness, and love. August Gade Shiv Sloan. Goodbye. Bye, Annette.
Bye.
It's just.